This is the second Photoshop tutorial. In this portion of the tutorial, we're going to go through adjusting the image and canvas size, transforming images, cropping, dodging and burning, and dealing with different basic adjustment types. So I'm going to open an image file that I can start working on and look at a couple of different options for it. So this is an image I opened directly from a camera, from having taken it from a camera, so I haven't done anything to this image other than open it up. As opposed to the previous part of the tutorial where we made our own base image file and then brought information into it, now we're working with kind of given information, so we might need to adjust it. So I'm going to go into Image and Adjustments and see Image Adjustments, image size, I apologize, and adjust some of the things about the way the image is structured. So if I go in here, I'm gonna look at what the image size is that I'm working with. So the total file size is 16.2 megabytes, and that is a combination of the size of the image and the resolution of the image. So right now my photograph is 9.84 inches wide, 6.387 inches tall, and its resolution is 300 pixels per inch. Let's say that I need the image at the end of the day to be around 6 by 8. 6 by 8. Because my dimensions are locked proportionally, it's only letting me adjust one at a time. I can't make this 6 by 8 because that's not a proportional relationship to what this already was. So I have to pick one versus the other. Excuse me. I can't, once I scale it down, I can't go back in and make it bigger in one dimension without losing content. So I'm going to make the smaller of the two dimensions correct, and then I can go in and crop it down so that it's 6 by 8 by just removing information in the width. I'm going to leave it at 300 pixels per inch, and you can see that my total image size has reduced a little bit. I'm going to say OK, and the image isn't going to change, although now it's 6 inches tall, which we can see over here in the rulers. I'm kind of making this 6 by 8 thing arbitrarily just to show you how image and canvas sizes differ. You could also make the adjustments to the image without cropping it down and then crop it in the program that you're using. Although, having said all of that, it's always better to be working with the final size and resolution if you know what they're going to be. You might not always know what you're going to do with an image. So now I've gone into image and canvas size, and in here it's telling me the same dimensions, but now I can adjust these two things separately. I could have also done that in the image size, although it would have squished it rather than cropping it. So if I change my width to 8 inches, you can see here that I have the same kind of transform matrix that I had in Illustrator. So right now it's telling me that it's going to take what was 9.243 inches and crop it down to 8 by cutting off the sides. I'm not cutting off the top or the bottom, I'm keeping that the same size. And if I hit OK, it's going to ask me to make sure that I know that I'm making the canvas smaller. And I'm going to hit proceed. You can see now that it cropped it down on both sides. If I undo that, and do it again, canvas size, I can now set the adjustment point from the left side and crop it down. Yes, I want to proceed, or the right side. The other way that you can crop things, there's a couple other ways, but the other most general way is by drawing a box around the part of the image that you want to keep, and under Image, Crop, and that'll cut it down. You don't necessarily know what size that box is unless you're looking in the information panel, which is here, info. You can see the size of the box. There isn't an input that you can enter the size of the box here, so you would have to go in and make some adjustments in the width and height of the rectangular marquee, which you could do by typing in fixed size and type in, say, 5 inches, 5 in by 3 in. So 5 inches by 3 inches, and hit enter. And it will, when you draw a new rectangular marquee, it will draw it at exactly 3 by 5, and then you can go in and crop it down, so image crop. it's a little bit of a, annoying way to go about it, so I would recommend working with image size, canvas size, and cropping. So I'm going to assume that that is the size of the image that I want at the end of the day. Excuse me. A couple of other things that you can do to start making adjustments to the image. Let's say, for example, that my horizon line wasn't totally straight and I wanted to straighten this thing out. So I'm actually going to go in and make it unstraight and then go in and straighten it. One of the ways that you can do that is through the transform tools. So first I need to tell it what I want to transform. So I'm going to select everything in the image because I want to rotate the whole thing, which I can do by clicking on Command or Control A or by Select and All. Once I have it selected, I can choose Command or Control T, which is a shortcut to open the transform settings, or you can go under Edit and Transform, Free Transform. This allows me, depending on where I'm hovering over the image, you can see if I'm above the right-hand corner, it's letting me rotate. If I'm above the top, it's letting me pull it in one direction or push it in one direction. I can do the same thing in the corner. I can hold down Shift and scale it proportionally, all sorts of different types of things. I'm going to just undo that really quickly because that's not the way I want to transform it. And I'm going to adjust it so that my horizon line isn't totally straight. Okay, so we're assuming this is where we're starting. I had to go in and adjust it so we had something to fix. I would do the same thing though. I would go in and select everything, Control A or Command A, Control or Command T to open the free transform dialog box, and then by hovering over the edge and by using a guideline, which I pull down from the rulers, I can make an adjustment so that I can see the horizon line straighten up along that edge. Once I've adjusted it to the point where I want it, I can go in and deselect it, and you can see now I've got a little bit of white around the edges that I don't want there anymore. So this would be a great time for me to crop an image, and I'm going to, under Style, turn this back to normal, which lets me set the size of the rectangular marquee. I'm going to go in as close as I can to the edges, and then crop the image. And now I have a rectangular image without any white around the edges. I'm going to get rid of my guides, and so I've straightened out my image. There are other transform options, so Command or Control A, Command or Control T, I'm back into free transform. If I right click on the image while I'm in the free transform option, you can see that there's a bunch of different versions in here, right? So free transform is what I'm in, which allows me to hover over different parts and scale and rotate. But I can also choose from skew, distort, perspective, warp, and some of the presets for rotation and flipping. Excuse me. So let's look at what it does when we choose some of these. So skew allows me to pull an edge of it, and it's kind of skewing the image in one direction. So I'm turning it from a rectangular into kind of a parallelogram. If I right click and choose distort, it lets me pick any edge and move it around. This is a good one for times when you're trying to not only straighten something out, but maybe adjust it if you weren't taking a picture head on, like if you had a smaller dimension here and a larger one here and you wanted to straighten them out. Be careful about all of these. They are distorting the information that's in your image, so if you start doing something pretty drastic, you're gonna see that in the image when you get to a certain point. Perspective allows for me to make perspective adjustments, so it's kind of like skewing but in both directions at one time. So if I had something that I wanted to try to take the perspective out of or adjust relative to an existing or some sort of reference image, I would use the perspect option. Warping puts a grid over top of the image and allows for me to pull parts of it, right? So I can kind of make this thing bulge out in the middle if for some reason that were what I wanted to do. And you can go in and adjust the edges of it and all of these different kind of things. This doesn't get used all that often. Usually it's in terms of correcting some sort of optical effect that's at the result of using a fisheye lens or something like that. I'm going to hit escape. I don't want to save any of these transformations that I had been making. If I did want to save them, I would just hit enter, and it will it will perform all of those transformations, and it will exit out, and it'll take me back into my image. I'm going to go into my history and go back because I don't want any of those transformations. I'm happy with the way that my picture is now configured. So we've transformed and we've cropped. Let's now start making some adjustments to the colors of the image and different parts of the image. Excuse me. I'm going to show you a couple things that we're not necessarily going to use for this image. Probably what I would want to do with this would be to make some adjustments to the saturation, so the brightness or the grayness of the image, and then the color balance. So is the blue the right blue, or does it want to be a little bit more green or a little bit more red? But I'll show you a couple of other basics, one of which is the dodge and burn tools. Excuse me, over here. Over here, the burn tool has dodge underneath it. Depending on which one is up in your presets, you'll see one versus the other. So these two are these two come from darkroom photography, right? So if you're working with in a darkroom with an enlarger and a piece of photographic paper that you're projecting a negative onto, you would dodge or burn the light from the enlarger to the paper. So dodging means you're blocking light in part of the image, and burning means you're adding additional light to the image. So if you know anything about how darkroom photography works, you know that a negative is placed in an enlarger, and the black parts of it block light, the white parts of it allow light through, and then there's a range in between. So you don't have any kind of specific control other than what you interfere with between those two. So dodging, I'm going to click on dodge here, and I'm going to come over top of the image, and you can see that it looks like I'm making the image lighter, or it appears that I'm making the image lighter in the area that I'm running my mouse over. And so this means it's keeping more light from the photographic paper, which means it's allowing for it to be whiter. I don't really want to do this to my image, so I'm going to go back. Burning is the opposite, right? So burning adds color to the image, or adds darkness to the image. I'm just going to increase the size of my brush a little bit so that you can see it. So that it's making the image darker in parts of the image, making the image darker in the parts that are underneath my mouse. You have adjustments up here, as with all tools. They are specific to either the dodge or the burn. You can choose which range of colors you want. So if I want to just make the dark parts darker, it will let me do that, fairly closely. If I want to have it be just a little bit darker, I can go over and change the range, or change the exposure of it, to slightly less, or I can change it to much more. So it's really going to make things a lot darker where the highlights are. And you can see the difference between those. Excuse me. I'm going to go back to where we aren't dodging or burning anything. Times when dodge or burn really work well are if, for instance, I wanted to make this part of the beach lighter or darker. I would go in and kind of really carefully select the edge. I would go in and refine the edge. I'm not going to do that now for sake of time, but I could come in here to this part of the image and maybe burn the beach so that it's a little bit darker than what it appears. Maybe I don't think that the kind of color balance of it relative to the rest of the image is quite enough, so I want to make it a little bit darker. Excuse me. I can also, in terms of making adjustments to the image, select things by a color range. So if I want to make all the blue parts different, lighter, darker, or something like that, one of the ways to select the blue, because I can't use my magnetic or my magic wand tool because I've got too many different types of blue. It's going to be hard for me to use the different marquee selection or something like that. I can go in here and under select I can choose color range. So we're going to start with the color range. And I'm going to pause this here. So if I want to take if I want to select out just the blue parts of the image, I can go under select and color range. And it'll let me pick a part of the image, so somewhere in this blue field, and then adjust for fuzziness of it, right? So how much closely related to that blue do I want the colors to be? And I can pick kind of a middle range, and I can pick a dark range by choosing these 3 different eyedroppers. So I'm going to add to it, I can choose the original color, and then I can add a range to that. It's not the light and the dark like it is in most Photoshop picker tools. and then I can subtract out from it a different range of color. And you can see kind of over here what the result of that's going to be. When I click OK, you can see I've now got ants marching all over the blue part, and then kind of speckled throughout the beach where there's little hints of blue. If I want to fine-tune this adjustment, I can choose my marquee, add to the selection to get these couple of spots over here and this little bit that's in the water. And I can choose to leave all the blue parts in the beach, or I could, subtract out by holding down Alt or Option and subtract out this lower portion of the beach or something similar to that, or I could kind of go in and fine-tune it. So let's say this is the part of the image where the blues are that I want to make an adjustment of. Now, the adjustments that I want to make are going to be in here under Image and Adjustments. Don't use the auto presets. Those are kind of the kind of cop-out way of doing it. Not that it has to be harder for you, but that you want to be the one controlling what Photoshop does to your image. You don't want Photoshop doing things for you. So I'm going to go in under Image and Manual Adjustments, and let's say I want to change what tone of blue this is. So let's go through quickly and just kind of talk about what some of these are. So Image Adjustments, brightness and contrast makes the image brighter or darker. Levels, excuse me, choose 3 points within the kind of range of colors of the image and let you adjust those. Curves, pick the entire range of colors or tones within the image and allow you to adjust it, and we'll go through these in a little bit. Exposure is really mostly used for HDR images. The rest of these you can kind of play around with. We're going to keep to these two. So hue and saturation lets you go in and choose either the overall portion of the image or the portion of it that you have selected, and lets you adjust kind of in a range of colors what color that blue is, right? So I'm making some pretty drastic adjustments. I probably don't want to have a red sky, but I can go in and start fine-tuning the original blue, and you can see how far we are from that original. I can either go towards more blue, towards more green, slightly more color. I can make it more saturated or really bright blue, or completely unsaturated, mostly black and white. I can also adjust how bright it is or how dark it is. I'm not going to make any sort of adjustments quite that drastic, but I do want to go in and maybe shift this a little bit towards a pinker blue, maybe, or maybe let's go more towards kind of a purpley blue. So I'm going to bring it up to about +8 over the original. The other thing that I can do in here is, instead of adjusting all of the colors in the selected area or all of the colors in the overall photograph, I can choose a range of colors that I want to adjust. So if I want to adjust just the cyans, I can choose that, and now just the part of that selected image that's cyan is being shifted. Excuse me. And so let's say this is kind of what I want the image to look like. I'm going to hit OK, deselect it, and see what this looks like overall. You can see the part of the beach that I didn't have selected. The blue is a really different range. It's a lot greener. So you would probably want to make sure that you're selecting the entire range that you want. Image and Adjustments, Color Balance. This lets me shift from one color to another color. So say the overall part of the image is not yellow enough for me, it's too blue. So I could kind of shift from one side to the other of the image and change the overall kind of feel of it, right? And you can see down here too in tone balance, I could do that just for the lowlights, I could do it just for the highlights, or I can do it for the midtones. And I can shift the other colors too, but in this particular image, the yellow and the blue are kind of the dominant range of colors. And also, a major type of adjustment that you would do might be brightness and contrast. So brightness lets you make it a lot brighter or darker, pretty straightforward, and contrast makes it much more black and white. So this is, I've got a lot darker darks and a lot lighter lights, or it kind of tries to even that out quite a bit and makes the overall range of colors a lot less. So everything is more middle gray than it is black or white. I'm going to hit cancel because I don't really want to make that adjustment. Maybe I want to make those adjustments in a different way, right? I'm not just going from black to white, but maybe I want to have a higher level of control over that. So for these reasons, I would use either levels or curves. As I mentioned before, levels are a way of choosing 3 points in the drawing, so black, the white, and then a gamma color in between, and adjusting the range of tones between them, right? So if I take the white part and I bring it closer to the middle, it's increasing the overall kind of brightness of the image because I'm telling it that white starts a lot further over than it used to, right? So you typically can tell where the majority of the color is in the image from this chart, right? So this is where most of the whites are. This is where the kind of black starts, and this middle tone is the one in between. So I can make it have a really broad range of white by increasing the distance between these two, a lot more range of darks by bringing this middle slider over, or some combination thereof, right? So I can start fine-tuning the range of tones in the drawing. So if I want to increase this middle range, I can do that here. Here's where the eyedroppers start to allow for you to pick the darks and the lights and the midtones. So I click on the dark and I pick the darker part of the image. I click on the light, I pick the lighter part of the image, it's going to turn it as white as possible, and then I pick the mid-range and pick something in between. You can start to play around with these and fine-tune things a little bit more. This is not really the way I want the image to go, so I'm just going to hit cancel. But now you know a little bit about what levels are. I can also adjust this range of tones by using the curves panel. Excuse me. In here, the kind of same is true. The top right is the whites, the bottom left is the darks, and the kind of line that connects them in between is the middle portion of it. But now instead of just having a point that I can adjust, I can start putting points along this line and making it into a curve, right? So I can start fine-tuning how the image appears. Is it a lot less contrasting? I'm sorry, it's going slowly here. Something is stuck in my computer. Here we go. I can start, adjusting the contrast, making it brighter, making it more contrasty, making it less contrasty, and so on and so forth. Someone once told me that the best way to have the image appear correctly is to have a kind of an S-shaped curve. I think you can play around with what that looks like and the degree to which that happens. But again, you can kind of choose the brights and the darks and adjust the range in between. I'm going to hit cancel.